So, Kevin, welcome to Better World Leaders, and I really appreciate you making some time for us today.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
So, first of all, I know where you are and what you've been going through, but just to set a little bit of the context for your experience right now, could you just share essentially where you're sitting and what's been going on for you these past few months?
Well, if you don't know, I live in Victoria, Melbourne, in Australia, and we are in lockdown, stage 4 lockdown. Some would call our leader Dictator Dan for keeping us in this situation. The headlines are that way inclined, but yeah, so we're in lockdown at the moment and have been for quite a few weeks now, coming up to 8 weeks, I think, and going to continue on until end of October. So it seems. So yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, I mean, just
Mm.
for the audience, because we do have listeners from all over the world. Australia's had this quite sort of polemic experience with COVID. We have a federal state system similar to America, and certain states have managed the whole process around COVID quite differently. And unfortunately, Melbourne have experienced a much more extreme version of the sort of protocols to try and reduce the caseload. And yeah, you guys
Yes,
have
yes.
copped it really hard. Essentially, that's the
Yeah, I
reality.
mean, we had a case explosion around July, I think, and
Yeah,
that kind of
yeah.
prompted a stage 4 kind of lockdown, which I think most Victorians were okay with at the start and said, okay, let's just handle it. I think as it wraps up now, I think our numbers are looking around. I haven't checked today, but below 50 on average.
Yeah.
So there's calls to kind of open it up, especially because the state has been locked down for most of the year. A lot of businesses are affected, and the restrictions are probably um, too restrictive for businesses to operate and get the economy going again. So there's big calls to kind of change that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Mm,
So let's
mm.
just explore sort of beyond the immediate, sort of your context, your experience, your background. So, I mean, the question that I like to ask at this stage is just simply, where have you come from to, sort of come to us today, and you can kind of start as far back as you feel is appropriate in response to that question.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think we were introduced by a common friend
Absolutely.
that you have, Sue Glendenning, who I have the great pleasure of knowing through BNI, which is a Business Network International chapter that I'm currently the president for. And, she's been a great contact and, business leader to kind of dialogue with. And so she introduced us. In terms of, how far I go back, well, I was born in Malaysia, spent some time in America while my dad was doing his MBA. This was when I was about 3 years old, 5 years old. Um, and then we moved back to Malaysia after that time, and then migrated to Australia in 1990 when I was about 11,
Yep.
and then spent the rest of my life residing in Melbourne and loving it. I love Melbourne. Yeah, and then throughout that time, yeah, just I don't know, assimilated into Australian life, and kind of grew up here, enjoying all of Australia. Got educated in university through a marketing degree, um, and then through that, which was one of the best experiences actually I had, which was my third year experience of university, and it just so happened to be an out of campus experience because I had to go work. And actually do work as a marketing student, and I learned so much more in that time than I ever did in sitting down to lectures. And I worked for Yarra Valley Water, which I still think was one of the best experiences for me, and came out of that with so much more experience than I thought I would have. And one of the managers encouraged me to go into management consulting, which I then applied for, got into Accenture, early 2000s, graduated 2000s, came out, joined them, great experience, great training, and then 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then when 9, yeah, and that was a big wow moment. Um, and that's when I switched careers as well. And there's a whole lot of information between those times and experiences in that time. But I switched careers and went into development and aid. and spent a lot of years in development and aid, over 10 years in on the field. Oh, well, about 8 years on the field, and then off the field doing fundraising. Um, and have recently left that, started a business called Clean As You Go, as you see in my um, background there. And yeah, that's what I'm doing now, operating a business. And I call it a for purpose business. And I steal this term from Tim Costello,
Yeah.
the former CEO. He had a dislike for the term not for profit, because we don't define ourselves by what we're not. We define ourselves by what we are, and what we are is for purpose. And I love that. I love that. I love that term. And so, yeah, we're a for purpose business, existing for the purpose, good purposes. And so I call it for, purposeful profit,
Yeah, absolutely.
purposeful profit. So,
Yeah,
yeah, and that's what I'm doing now.
mate, that's a fantastic synopsis, and yeah, there's probably three distinct areas that I'd like to spend some time talking about. The one is the profit for purpose piece, and we had another conversation here with a guy called Harvey Penny, whose catchphrase is essentially "purpose powers profit,"
Yep.
um, and uh, and yeah, so it's an emerging theme here, and yeah, the business that I run, very yeah, sort of similar intention and impact model. So we can definitely spend some time talking about why we believe business should and can operate this way. I'd also really like to spend some time talking about your sort of insights and the knowledge and that you gained and the perspective that you grew in this sort of, I suppose, like middle era. We could sort of say, like, your time on the field and then in fundraising, yeah, to
Hmm.
sort of use your terms. But I'd actually like to sort of shift back to sort of what
Sure.
I'll describe as a third domain. First of all, this original sort of shift, and this term that I like to refer to as a moment of calling. I mean, was there a specific instance or a conversation, or sort of a more gradual but still sort of identifiable realization that actually there's something else I should be doing rather than continuing a successful career with a global management consulting firm like Accenture?
Yeah, sure. Look, the dream was Accenture, to kind of go up through that rank and gain partners. That was my dad's future for me. In fact, I remember him sitting down and saying, "Kevin, now that you've got in, just stay in there, and work yourself up to partner." That was his plan for my life, and it did not work out that way, as we can see. But in terms of your question, what was their turning point? I probably have to go a bit further back, because than the actual turning point itself. So I grew up in a household that was semi-religious, in terms of my mum was a Christian and my dad was not.
Okay.
My dad was university educated, MBA, hard sciences, all that kind of stuff. My mum, much simpler than that, not a university educated person, but a religious person, Christian upbringing. And so I had that dual perspectives on life, my whole life. And I remember one day my dad said, you, I think I was 12 or something, and he said, "You got to decide what you believe in." And I remember I was not able to
Yeah,
decide
I'm not
at
ready
the
for
age of
that.
12. It's just too confusing, too much information, to try to decipher. So, but one experience I had was when I finished year 12. And when I finished year 12, like any year 12 person, was excited about the possibilities. And one of my teachers at school, who was a believer, a Christian, invited me to go to a camp. And it was essentially to go help out in certain towns and just run what we call a coffee shop. And the coffee shop was just a safe place for the youth to come and hang out, um, and and not go and get drunk, basically. And so it was just a safe place. And so I ended up going. I had no idea why I was there, really. And it was training on how to handle situations and all that kind of stuff. But when I went to this camp, it was just, I think, one of the biggest turning points in my life, because one, it showed me the impact of when you go out there and you want to do help people, and the impact of helping people. And we got, grassroots level helping, being with the local youth and with their struggles and their families and all the struggles within families. And you get to know, and I was young, I was only 18. And that was a real change for me. And I was, I guess, brought into a Christian experience, a real conversion experience, if you like, and kind of opened my eyes to the possibility of um, who God was in my life and what that meant for myself,
Mm.
and a real identification of, hey, I'm there. There's more, out there. And so that experience kind of carried me into university experience. And in university, I also went overseas and started doing trips overseas to places like Myanmar, Burma,
Yeah.
and Cambodia. And because I had that background coming from a migrant background from Malaysia, I guess it was kind of coming back to Asia experience, but not the Asia that I necessarily knew, which was middle class Asia. It was more in the poverty area, and that kind of showed me a whole nother side of life as well. And so those were kind of inputs into how I started to think, in terms of what I wanted to do with my life. And so um, it was a parallel experience because I had that experience, and then I had the career building experience, of going through university and getting a good job, and that's a good thing to do. And I remember sitting in the office, when I was working in Accenture. Um, and all these kind of gathered experience I've had throughout university and through my Christian experience. This was after 9/11. I was sitting there in the office, and we're kind of working away there in a strange environment because after 9/11, a lot of things changed, especially in consulting as well. Consulting industry used to be, this place where you go and there was money throwing around everywhere. You get to fly everywhere and all this high corporate stuff. And there was this things changed around 2000 after 9/11, and the industry changed a lot, and the money was not quite there anymore. And I remember sitting down there and going, "Wow, is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life?" Sitting in front of a computer. It was late at night, and we're coding away for some client, and I had this distinct experience, and I said, if there's more, let show me, you know, show me. And that's all I kind of put out there. And within 2 weeks, the whole department, I think we lost about 50% because there was a big cut
Yeah. Right.
throughout the whole department. I was in communication high tech, and all the budget left that industry. There was only two real big groups at that time, Telstra and Optus, and they cut budgets, and so our whole department got let off. And then I remember walking the streets in Melbourne with all my Accenture friends going, "What are we going to do? We've just been fired from our dream jobs." A lot of people started applying for the next consulting job. Um, but I remember sitting there in Burke Street and saying to myself, I was reminded of the prayer I made and said, "Is there more?" And that question lingered in my brain, and I thought maybe I'll just hold out, instead of just going down this path, and being fearful about the next job I would get. I would just wait out, and I waited for about 8 months, and I did a lot of reading in that 8 months and just contemplating about what next. And at the end of that 8 months is where I ended up in a I guess whether you call it a job or a position within an organization called Partners International. It's actually an American organization. Um, and yeah, I found this position, and it was quite through luck because someone in my church just started one of the teams for this American firm. And he was a doctor, very prominent doctor. He was a cardiologist who gave up his practice kind of in the height of it to go into development and aid work and Christian development and aid work. And so he invited me because I was kind of in the same position but 20 years younger,
Mm.
to be part of that. And so I said, "Yep, it's kind of the position I've been looking for." And so it was happen, chance, coincidence, a divine intervention, what you call, and that kind of kicked it off. And so in 2001, 2002, I started traveling into China And that kind of kicked off that whole part of my life. So I don't want to go too much further because your original question was what kind of a turning point in my life, and that was kind of the turning point. Yeah, out of tragedy, kind of this whole opportunity came.
Yeah.
Mm,
No, I get it. I mean, it's a detailed exploration, but I understand that decisions are rarely made in the moment, right? Like there's always
no,
the
yeah,
context forming. I mean, I will not go into the same amount of detail because I want to get to that second domain, that the experience, the lived experience, and what that's now informed you as to your leadership. But I have these three particular references going back to when I was probably 17 at high school, campaigning to raise awareness and build a petition to cancel third world debt. So that was in, I think, 1997, and that was my first sort of like
yeah,
semi-activist, sort of like, even at that young age, leaning into what I would say are now pronounced strengths of communication and connection and engagement with people around purpose and a contribution that they can make, even at a very, very grassroots level. Um, but that didn't ultimately get me or the cause very far because it's just names on a
mm,
piece of paper. And then I had this other
mm,
one where I was traveling in North Africa and witnessed a traumatic event, witnessed basically a small town get washed away in a flash flood,
oh well,
which was a climate impact event, um, and had this very direct first line experience with the kind of stuff that you normally see on the evening news, right? Like, here's
mm,
this awful stuff, and here's this flood in Bangladesh, or here's this fire in wherever. I was sitting on the bonnet of a Land Rover watching this unfold in front of me,
mm,
um, and I did what little I could in the moment, handing over some cash and trying to get kind of literally arms into this stuff and try and help, but ultimately didn't lead to any significant change in me. I
mm,
went back to my normal world, went back to my normal life, kind of filed this one away and didn't do anything. I started donating to UNHCR and others, but I didn't do anything. My
mm,
actions, my behaviors did not change. And then the most recent one, so with this bushfire bearing down on us, had this. I'm not religious, but I think it's the kind of experience that could potentially be referred to as an intervention. Because what I received was literally this vision, right? That I was on the roof of my house with this very sort of ineffective, puny little sort of filtration system, trying to rig up something to try and dampen the house down if the fire front did come through. And I received this vision of basically everything going quiet, turning full 240 degrees, and just seeing everything on fire, but in the kind of like the movie sort of way, not deafening, sort of raw and total blackness and inability to breathe because of the smoke, which a bushfire is actually like. But this was just like
mm,
walls of orange fire. But it was calm, like the emotion was calm, but also very clarifying. And the message that I didn't hear, but I received very clearly in my brain was, there's nowhere to hide. And that to me, as I kind of like over the hours and days that followed this, sort of unraveled the meaning of this, was essentially there are challenges that face all of us, essentially regardless of status, position, age, access to capital. There's stuff going on in the world right now, whether you want to look at social justice or you want to look at poverty, or you want to look at provision and access to sanitation, or you want to look at climate change or breakdown in food systems. There's a
mm,
list. Like, these things affect everybody. There's nowhere that anyone can hide from these things, and the only thing you can do is everything you can do
mm,
by making a change and using the things that you do have. For you and I, we have businesses that we run. We can use those for purpose. Yeah. So that was the moment, but there was several moments before that sort of took
yeah.
me to that point and that moment of journey. So thank you
Mm,
for sharing yours, and I appreciate you bearing with me through mine. Um,
no,
so let's
it's-
focus in a little bit more directly now on this period of time. So you're working for this sort of American outfit, and then you transitioned into World Vision
mhm,
and spent some time there. So maybe if I could just ask you to sort of collectively, sort of pick on some of the key learning experiences that you sort of went through, around how do these organizations make an impact? How does leadership steer the impact that they make, and maybe what were the sort of sculpting moments of your own sort of outlook on leadership and the role of organizations like this in business? Sorry, that's three
Yeah,
questions.
sure. I'll try to remember them. It's a fascinating question. The role of leadership. I think leadership plays. I don't think anyone would disagree with this. Plays such a key part in any society that we live in. And I guess when I traveled around the world, and I traveled extensively through the first part with Partners International. I started off in China, and that was when the the Iron Curtains just fell down in 2000s, and the concrete was going up everywhere. It was still soft, and they were starting to build, and it was just that rush of building and commerce, and understanding of freedoms and all that kind of stuff. And that was a big transition of leadership over there. And you see people rise up in the local communities in leadership that they've never had before to transform the communities. And people, you know, and especially the Chinese are very business orientated, take that leadership and make what they will of it. And then I traveled to Central Asia, which is I spent about 5 years there, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and you see a different form of leadership. You see a post-Russian, you know, leadership over there, and the effects of what that was. And then I traveled to Africa and extensively throughout Africa as well. To deepest, darkest Congo, and then you see the effects of poor leadership in certain areas, and what can happen there. But then you see pockets of inspiring leadership where people would I think an aspect of great leadership is the ability for them to sacrifice their own wants and needs for the greater good. Yeah. And so you see people, doctors who have given up professions in they could have had in Europe to set up hospitals in the middle of nowhere to help people. I mean, to me, that is leadership, and you see those pockets rise up everywhere to kind of give hope and light to people. So yeah, like that kind of experience shaped a lot of what I think can happen in leadership, and part of what I do now is because of that and what I see is possible. We were having a conversation before, Tim, and you know, o- often we think it's leaderships of those in higher positions, in influential positions that matter, and of course they do matter. But everyone is in leadership in some form, self leadership or in leadership of organizations or managerial positions. And I think it all matters because the culture of what you set as a leader, whether you're leading from the bottom or leading from the top, will affect culture. And I think culture then affects everything else. Yeah. Um, so that was from the field how I experienced how leadership can change things. And then when I came off the field, when I say off the field, it was kind of intensive programming that I did on the field. And then when I came off the field, it was more about fundraising. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then that was, bigger kind of macro things that I would come into, especially with World Vision. World Vision is one of the largest NGOs in the world. Um, and so seeing it from a very macro perspective and how they implement certain things and working with governments um, to make sure that happens, and leadership in that context was very different again, but still same. It was so much about culture changing. And when we talk about um, the safety of children in these places, it's often education. It's not creating programs that putting physical barriers for safety. It was more educating the general population on the value of children, and the value of women and little girls. Uh, and so it was a mindset change more than anything else. So, yeah, I think that's kind of my experience of what leadership does in a community. So I'm not sure whether I'm still
No,
staying on.
no, 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 no,
Yeah.
no, no, no.
Mm.
Keep going. I mean, it's perfect. I'm going to ask a specific question, but before I do, I think that's an invaluable perspective. I mean, and one which I absolutely share, and very much sits in the purpose of this podcast and the organization I lead, and sort of the overall, I think, sort of leadership ethos, of the network that we're engaging with. That it's not up to a person, a level of anything, government, organization, whatever, like there is an absolute demand for grassroots level, bottom up change,
mm,
um, to tackle these big challenges.
mm,
Um, and I think a lot of the time, the more attention you spend looking at leaders at the top of anything, the more you realize that the majority of them are followers as
mm,
much as they are leaders.
mm.
And I think politicians in particular, right? Like they will follow the demand side trend of their electorate or whatever the pollsters tell them their electorate are telling them to do, right? I think there are few, not enough, sort of bold politicians who will essentially stand up and say, this is what we're going to do because of this. Believe me, here we go. You'll see the outcome down the line.
Mm.
A lot of the time, it's responsivity, it's policy based on anger or
Yeah,
pacification or whatever. I think more so, I see sort of mid-level or sort of grassroots level leadership is actually what drives change and activates
yeah.
sort of a
I,
positive
I,
response.
yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you on that. I think at a fundamental level, I agree that personal responsibility is vital. Yeah, and key to change. And everyone can take personal responsibility. It's
Yeah,
not something that someone up the top needs to take more than you do, because as it rolls out and you take personal responsibility, and this is the thing. I think what's lacking a lot in our conversation around leadership these days is a moral compass. Yeah, to be able to be a leader, and we touched on that before, is to really be able to sacrifice your own self for something that is of truth and good for the greater people. But how often will you sacrifice yourself to do that? And the examples of leadership that I showed you on the ground, on the field, where people have taken that stand, they could have had a better life if they stayed in whatever country they did, but they decided to go to a place of need and use their skills for that. It took personal sacrifice for that to happen, and unless you had a moral compass to be able to do that, then it's hard. And so I think so much of our leadership today, we focus on the hard. The leadership must do this and be a certain type of personality or certain, but really we forget about the fundamental truths about how where that comes from. And I think a moral compass really is important in that sense.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
everyone can have that.
And everyone can choose to take that position, or
Mm,
they can sort of not know any different because it's been imbued in them from birth, or it's
mm.
sort of it's significant within their
Yeah,
their tribe or their family or their faith. Um,
yeah.
but I think the other thing is that what you've experienced, and I've had a very small amount of comparable experience sort of on the ground in Asia and Southeast Asia and Central South America. But I think the other thing is that, like, these are extreme examples of people essentially sort of abandoning a way of life to
Yeah,
go into one of
sure.
service, right? And these are absolutely vital and deserve celebration. But in order to do good and follow purpose and do more, you don't have to kind of pack up the practice and
Yes.
get on the boat and
Yes,
never
I know
come
where you're
back,
going with
right?
this. Yes, yeah.
And I think particularly at the moment, but to your common theme of it's leadership in service of the greater good, which is in sacrifice of something. Like, we spend a lot of time looking at future of work, future of leadership, and the future is like an hour from now and everything moment from here. And a
Mm,
lot of the leadership approaches, as we prefer to use that term over styles, because approach is sort of deliberate and intentional, and is a way of making progress towards something, right? And allows you to vary it, because with the world that we're living in and what lies ahead of us, there's all of the leadership approaches that are being described empirically and lived by the people I would say the best performing leaders right now. They're all in a way devotional, right?
mm,
Whether it's participative leadership, where it's all about bringing everybody together and looking to bring these collective intelligences and collective sources of wisdom, rather than the leader is the one source of truth, right?
mm, mm,
Or it's a sharing of power, and it's delegatory leadership, right? Or it's taking a coaching approach to leadership rather than a mentoring one. I'm going to ask questions to activate your potential rather than tell you what to do based on my lived experience. These are all about sacrificing something, right? So it's sacrificing status as the leader who knows everything, right? Well, I don't know everything. You're the team.
Yeah,
We've got collective wisdom
yeah,
here. What are we going to do? Or
yeah,
sacrificing power. I
yep,
delegate my authority to you because now you're in a better position to do what needs to be done, and you don't have to keep coming to me, right? Like, these are all sacrifices that for some are innate and it's just the way that they do. But for a lot, it's not the way that they have seen leaders operate. It's not the way that
mm,
they've been taught to lead. Um, and a lot of the time, it's not the way that they're sort of sure they should lead. And there's a lot of fear of failure that then comes out of that, right? So I think that there is this sort of push and pull effect. I think we're being pulled to operate and lead in very different ways because of the challenges we face and the complexity of our world. But we're also sort of being pushed by these examples of people like yourself who are saying, come on, guys, you know what? Actually, I've seen this. There's a better way of doing things, and we can apply it to our regular lives, and we're going to get a better outcome. And this is why.
yeah, sure, yeah, sure. I think that's a great point. Like, not everyone can tap into that power. Yeah, it takes a certain amount of courage to be able to stand up for, you know, when I say moral compass, or personal responsibility, everyone knows that little bit of thing that you're not quite doing right. Yeah. So somehow maybe we're taking advantage. Like, for example, in my industry, the cleaning industry,
Yeah, sure.
it's rampant, rampant. Let's go down to, the nitty gritty of, of applying what I'm talking about.
Yeah, let's
Right?
bring it home.
It's
Absolutely.
it's not easy. It takes a certain one sacrifice, but courage to make that sacrifice happen. Right? So we're new into this industry. We bought over an existing company. We're now 2 years and a bit into operating this company, and we've kind of, we've made it more than it was before. Made it a lot more relational with clients and with our staff, which is great. But one of the things that came to light with my business partner and I was when we start looking at the numbers. We know that rampant underpaying of people is a big problem in our industry, and our business model is one where we don't have many staff. We have a lot more subcontractor. Yeah, so, and subcontractors predominantly are people from overseas who cannot speak English as well as we would, who don't understand certain legalities of things, and so they get taken advantage of. They don't have a voice, and so they get underpaid. Yeah, so we know this is a thing in the industry, and when we looked at our numbers, we thought, how in the world are they performing that job with that amount of money? Yeah, so it was this question that was going through our mind. Now, my business partner and I could have easily gone, well, let's forget that because we can pocket all that. Let's not talk about the gross margins because, it's good profit for us. But we started to have to ask those questions because our conscience wouldn't allow us to continue to operate this. Now, am I some leader of Spotless and a large, commercial cleaning crew? No, I'm just a small business. But to that point, everyone can take leadership in this. And if everyone took leadership in it, then we wouldn't underpay people. And that's what we decided to do. We started looking at our numbers and trying to up the pay where it needed to be upped so that they could, you know, be rewarded for the work that they do. And they do great jobs. And I think since that point, there was a culture shift in our organization as well, and in our business, and the workers there, they felt a bit more appreciative. We definitely built a better relationship with these guys. So there was a net effect that happened. Although, in terms of pure numbers, it did not look good. We actually grew out of that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even though we give a bit away, we actually gained a lot more. Now, that wasn't the purpose of it. The purpose of it was because we felt obligated and morally, something was not quite right. So, and we're not saying that we got everything right as well, because there's still a lot of things to be fixed within the whole industry in general. And so we're on a journey to be able to be part of that voice. Um, but to your point, I think everyone can do that. Yeah, you don't need to be a CEO to be able to make those kind of calls. So yeah, I think
No,
that's
it's fascinating. And
mm,
I think So the thing that I'm gonna speak to in that, and it's a great point, and thank you for the very, I think, appropriate. Let's get kind of granular with this, right? And let's take it into a real world example of your business. But I think the key thing that I've received from that, and that I'm going to focus on, is I think there's this disparity of perspective in terms of, well, I'm going to wait until I've got enough, and then I'm going to do the right thing.
Mm,
But I've got to get there before I can, or it's I'm going to do the right thing because it's the right thing. And in doing so, I anticipate that we'll perform in the right way and that will grow over time. And I think for a lot of people, that that second perspective is one that they really want to take and they do take, but it's one of hope, and it's hope that doesn't actually have the data to inform that it's the right decision commercially, and it's a right decision which is going to actually come to growth because
mm,
you're doing the right thing. And what
mm-hmm,
I'm absolutely a believer in, because I do the research, um, and I read sources from BCG and McKinsey, all the way through to, like look at the performance on the Nasdaq of organizations that are performance led versus purpose driven. And over
mm-hmm,
time, and I've got a friend who's given me like his investor relations pack that he took into a business case with a big global business to basically say, this is, and he's an accountant, like this is the financial business case for being purpose led. They outperform over time by a significant ratio in return on capital employed, on return on investment, in dividends paid, like all of these reasons why you see big companies like Unilever and many, many others going, hey, you know what? Enough. We are a purpose driven business. This is how we make decisions, and so
mm,
on and so on. But I
mm,
actually think you and I are at an advantage because, the old analogy of, the, turn the little catamaran versus the oil tanker, right? Like,
yeah.
we're running small businesses. We're nimble. We're agile. We can make a decision like that. And it's our call. So I think that absolutely allows us to just do the right thing and keep doing the right thing. But what I'm also very much sensing, and I think the data is building, it's not quite there as a set yet, but that there is a lot of not just interest, but demand building, from big customers to say, well, we need suppliers that are all about this right stuff,
Mm,
right? Like,
mm,
yeah, proper governance, correct practices, do no harm. Don't just do no harm, do good. And then they want to look at your diversity index and they want to look at your climate impact scores and all of that kind of stuff. Like, I actually really think that that is coming. And I hope that it's not being done just for good PR. I actually don't think it is.
mm,
Because certainly I'm aware of some statistics that, you know, from a product perspective, consumers will pay a lot more and will sort of cede knowingly a lot more margin to a product that is doing no harm and, having a
mm,
positive climate
mm,
impact and and,
mm,
and, and is, made with natural products like that. That is there. You can see that in the retail consumption data.
mm.
So I think we can apply the same logic to a services business like yours and mine, um, and anticipate that there's going to be a similar demand curve.
Yeah,
That's my prediction. What do you think?
yeah. Well, I think the collective consciousness of this is increasing, isn't it? I heard a business leader, his name's Dave Hodson. He owns a capital investment fund, and he said that he's very much in line with what we're talking about in terms of culture changing. And he said if we get 6% of businesses, and I don't know how accurate it is, but this is what he says. He's quoting this. If we get 6% of small, medium-sized SMEs on board, it will be the tipping point for cultural change. And the reason is because small businesses and medium-sized businesses play such a big part. I think there's 600,000 small businesses in Victoria alone. I don't know how many will be left after this lockdown, but if we can get 6% of them operating in this way, then it will be the tipping point for everyone to act in this way as well. Because everyone wanting suppliers will want suppliers who are like this as well, and so it will be, you know, the push towards all that. So,
Yeah, that
100%,
aggregator effect is the key. Um,
100%.
Yeah, because do we look to the the top 5 biggest businesses or the 500,000 smallest businesses,
Mm.
right? Like, and these guys are going to move faster. That net contribution is probably going to outpace each other quite quickly. And if
Yeah,
these guys move first, the counterweight will probably pull the others along as well.
yeah.
So let me just
It
ask you
yeah, go on.
sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, it's an interesting thing as well. You cite some research around doing good in a business and how that or for purpose a purposeful business is in long term more profitable. Um, and I liken it. If you take the concept, because sometimes it's so big, that idea is such a big idea. But if you take it to an individual level and people you like to hang out with, and an individual level, you like to hang out with certain types of people.
Indeed.
Yeah, right? And all we're saying is that you be that person in your business. Yeah, you be generous, you be faithful, you say what you do, what you say. All these very general things that we will apply to any friendship, or any partnership that we will have. Then just live that out. Put policies in place to make sure that your business runs that way, and you will attract good business. Yeah, good contracts, good staff, and that's the outcome I think that will
Indeed.
happen. And so, at a granular level, we kind of understand that from a relationship, we just apply it, and organizations kind of grow that way.
Hannah,
So,
I'm going to ask you what may be a tricky question, and obviously I'm not asking you to disclose anything, but do you see the proof of this in the interactions you're having with customers? As you've obviously bought and rebranded a business, you're going into a competitive market, which is definitely price sensitive. It's viewed as a commodity service. Are you seeing customers essentially buying into this message and to what you're offering?
well, yeah, okay. So, to that point, I guess in our world, when we look at contract cleaning, yeah, because we win contracts and we perform that contract. Um, we can look at that contract as just a customer,
Yeah,
someone paying bills, and we get our staff there, they clean, we get invoicing, and they are just a customer. And I think in a lot of ways that's how it was operating. They were just kind of customers. When my business partner and I came in, and we're kind of in our personalities very relational, we brought that aboard, and we said, no, they're not just customers, they're the people that work and live there. They want a great environment. Every time they come into the door, they want a great environment, and we clean a lot of common area for apartments as well. It's where they live. And so I think that that way of being translated into how we interact with our partners and our clients. We say we even call them partners. Um, and we said, no, look, we want to do this job not because we're paid to do this job well, but because we really care about these spaces. And there was a huge turnaround. And so I think the retention rate for our business before we were on board was quite low. Um, and now we're sitting on close to 98% retention rates,
which is
which
massive.
is
Yeah.
huge in the
Yeah.
cleaning
In
industry.
the cleaning, yeah, I
It's
mean, yeah, we won't go into the stats of it, but I've done some work with cleaning companies, and I absolutely know that that's enormous as a
Yeah,
comparison.
right.
Yeah,
And often the case that we would become their trusted partners now. So it wouldn't only just be cleaning. So we kind of expanded our services to go into handyman services,
yeah,
electrical services, facility maintenance for services and plumbing and all the different things. Why? Because our customers wanted to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, can you fix this for us? Because you do that aspect of your job so well already." Now, was that us being smart businessmen going, "Hey, if we do this well, we're going to get opportunities this way"? Maybe, but really it was because we just wanted to do a great job by them, and lead in that way, and not be, I guess, just doing business for the sake of making profit. It was
yeah.
a purpose behind it. And one of the things that we say as well, like every clean matters, because part of our profits go towards different social projects. Every clean matters. It matters to the client, and it also matters to the beneficiaries that we donate to. So that kind of philosophy then translates to everything we do, and it has improved our business. In fact, we've almost doubled the business since we took it over. So
So
and
I'm
I
going to
think
say
that
that's a
showed.
yes.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
there
yeah.
is the proof right there. So we've got a
Mm.
98% retention rate in an industry standard, which is significantly lower than that, and we've got a doubling of growth in and you're saying 2 years, right? Like you've had this
Yeah,
business for
yeah,
2 years. So that, I think, is going to be celebrated as, yes, this is the proof that
yeah.
this can work. But and also, yeah, yeah,
Mm,
you've got the the growth of the mixed service offer, opportunities to do more. But that's an interesting one. And as you say, are we doing this almost? Sorry, I'm projecting myself into you
that's
and
all
your
right.
business partners' heads now.
Mm,
Are we doing this because we're smart? Are we doing it? Because we've got a strategic plan here. That's we've done our market research and we know that this is the way to go, and we've spotted a niche or whatever. Or are we doing it intuitively because it sits within our faith and it sits within our value system and we know it's the right thing to do? So it's intuitive. The outcome's the same. Doesn't matter. Um,
mm,
but that last bit there, I think that to an extent, maybe especially in any marketplace where the comparability of service offering is somewhat limited, right? Like the variability of how you go about cleaning a space. Okay, you can mechanize some elements, you can use some software algorithms to chart the efficiency of the cleaning routes, and you can vary the dilution of your chemicals, right? Like, but outside of that, uh, um,
yeah.
but every clean matters, and then the application as that sort of person is moving through that space. Again, good on you, because you go to the research, and what that says is that by engaging an individual with every individual action contributes to the higher purpose and the meaning that comes from that. That is a massive productivity enabler
Mm,
because it gives a
mm,
motivation to something which otherwise might seem arbitrary, or even maybe, sort of demeaning in some way.
mm, mm.
I mean, and it's something, again, a shared sort of path between us. Every time we do something, we create a giving impact in the world, right? And it's we just sort of formalized that, sort of launching in October this year to, okay, we're going to put a specific number around this. Like every time we make anything happen, we give, or we create a giving of 1,000 impacts in health, education, food, or environment, and then we top it up with something else depending on the service line, and there's a margin equation there. But we don't just do this and then put it in our board report, right?
No.
Like we do it, we ask you as the customer, which of those 4 areas would you like your 1,000 impacts to go towards? And then which of these 17 global SDGs matters the most to you? And that's where the additional donation will go. And then the team member who delivers the service, they get to choose where an allocation goes to them based on that same index, right? So that's attaching specific meaning and contribution of a higher purpose to a leadership coaching session or facilitating a workshop or doing a cleaning job.
Yeah,
And I don't know
yeah.
about you, man, but that gives me a reason to get out of bed every day, if nothing
Yeah,
else.
great. No, good on you. I think what you're doing is fantastic, and it's again leading from your position and ability to do that. One of the struggles that we had, I wouldn't say struggle, but one of the jobs that I had in World Vision was as head of corporate partnerships. So we were trying to win the favor of people like Unilever and we were working with large corporates. And one of the things was so interesting to see when you ask the question, is it a PR exercise? Yeah, oftentimes when we do these things, is it just another marketing gimmick that we go, okay, we're doing some good with what we do? But it's so evident when the companies that do it well. Like for example, we work with Jetstar, and Jetstar when you book an airline ticket, which is very hard to do nowadays, there was an ability for you to donate part of that to a cause. Now, you would think that, okay, that's a great gesture. What's the impact of that? Well, it was enormous. For Jetstar, it was a great narrative that they could tell. Every time they were flying into a certain country, they said, hey, we actually have a project on the ground which is helping this country that we're flying to. Do you want to know more about it? Um, the staff were so much more engaged. They could say, instead of talking about the airline experience, they could talk about a purpose experience, and some of the staff would have actually visited some of these villages, and so they could see the impact of what they were doing as staff members. It was just beyond producing a great service. Producing a great service was part of, hey, let's get this um, experience great for our clients so that we can actually impact these kind of communities even more. So I think the ability to implement it, and have the net effect of that, the net benefit of that, happen across so many different levels, from client to customer, client to staff member to, you know to the whole operation, is enormous if you can implement it well. So good on you for encouraging others to do the same.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. I mean, and look, it's not. I would like to do a lot more, and so on and so on. But I think
That's okay.
the other thing,
We all do our bit.
a bit, it's it, and it's the small steps towards the overall outcome, right? And it's being part of, you know, the mass rather than waiting for the one to move, right?
That's
Like,
right. That's right.
um, so, but I also, it's also given me a real level of comfort with profit, right? Because there's a part of me which is, I think, kind of innately altruistic. And
Mm.
I'll do something to help someone, and then I'll kind of figure out how and whether I should charge them for it, right? And I have, endured some criticism for that from certain parties in the past. Disclaimer: my advisory board have given me some stern words about this. Um, but I'm now much more comfortable with profit because I know that if I'm more profitable, I can be more impactful,
Mm.
right? And I look at purpose driven profit as a way to get to a position of having more profit by attracting the right customer who wants to work with an outfit like us versus the hundreds of others that do a similar version of what we do. Um, and that when we get there, we can choose to do all this great work,
Mm.
but we
Mm.
also know that we've made a contribution along the way. And we
Yeah.
don't have to wait to, oh, great, now we've got the $1 million EBITDA. Now we can donate $100,000,
Mm.
right? Like it's not,
Mm.
it's, well, I don't know if we'll ever get $100 million EBITDA,
Mm.
but we've gotten this fantastic profit result and look at what we've achieved on the way. And now how do we reinvest this profit in such a
Mm.
way that it can activate a whole new level
Mm.
of compounding growth and then look at the impact from that. So I'm going to
Mm.
ask you a question and invite you to give some advice, right? So if somebody's been listening to this and they're in any of these levels of leadership role that you described earlier, right, which is essentially to say anyone that's listening to this is in a is in a role of leadership, are there
Mm.
some specific steps that you would suggest people take? Are there any questions that you might suggest that they consider, or even just some resources that have helped you that you would orientate people towards?
Um, that's a good question. I probably should have prepared a bit earlier. Um, if I was to think about it, I think the first step is always to ask that hard question. Yeah. If and it's often times you don't have the time to ask these questions and to have the reflective time to actually ponder what is in my business or what is within my purview, my influence, which if I search deep within, I know something's not quite right. Yeah, something I can fix. It might be small. It might be a system issue. It might be a pay issue, whatever it is. And you start with that little voice. Yeah, and I think that plays out because once you get used to that voice in your head and acting on that conscience or whatever you want to call it, I think that plays itself out. And I think that's how it started for me. And not that I'm a perfect person, but I'm conscious of that, and like you say, you're altruistic because you're listening to a certain voice. And so I think it starts there. You ask that question. And it was a hard question for my business partner and I to ask because it had real consequences of us, giving away gross profit for no reason apart from we have to satisfy that voice that felt that something wasn't right. And so I think it starts there. There are resources that I can lead you to. Some are probably a bit more Christian ways of thinking around these things. I know someone set up a course that helps you walk through some of this and align your business to a greater purpose. So I can send you resources on that
Yeah, perfect. I'll
later
get them
on.
in the show
But
notes.
yeah, yeah. Um, and certainly talk to organizations like World Vision who want to help your business align themselves to other purposes as well if you're not sure how to do that. So there's certainly ways to do that. And it's exciting to see the journey because I was part of that, introducing businesses to this concept, and for them to take that journey, everyone was activated from the staff, like I was talking before, to the leader who's making it happen. And it's exciting to see that transformation happen at an individual level as well as the corporate level. So yeah, certainly. Yeah, I'll send you some links.
Perfect. So look, I think that's a good place to leave it. And thank you very much for everything that you've shared, for your time and your energy. And I will sort of say, thank you for everything that you and your business partner are choosing to do with Clean As You Go. But most especially just for sort of sharing your personal journey and that cascade to get you to that moment of commitment and risk, and I'm very, very glad to hear how well it's all playing out and sort of rewarding you. So that's awesome.
Yeah,
Is there
sure.
anything sort of as a sign off that you'd like to say? Any sort of rally cry that you may have, or just simply sort of to share a sentiment with the audience that is here with us now?
Uh, Well, firstly, thank you, Tim, for inviting me on this podcast. I didn't really know what to expect when I was first invited to be, to pick my brain on this topic. Often you think, oh, what do I know about this? So it's great to have a conversation with like-minded people to promote a purposeful profit for people. There is no rally cry, I guess. For me, it's more, if you're listening to this, yeah, think about how you can align yourself to a purposeful profit. And if you don't know how to do that, reach out to myself or Tim, and we'll lead you down that path.
We'll certainly do what we can.
Mm.
100%. No, I'll take the opportunity to sign off with my rally cry, which is better leaders, better world. And we'll leave it there for today. So thank you, Kevin, and good on you, and keep doing the
Great,
great work.
great. Thanks, Tim. Much appreciated.
You'll find audio and video recordings for this episode, as well as links and related resources mentioned today in the podcast area of 4iLeadership.com/insights. This is the Better World Leaders podcast, brought to you.
You never know where it goes,
No, you don't. And I tell you, man, like to an extent, you create what you like, so you have to be cautious of that. Like I'm creating a podcast that I would listen to, as much as I don't go back and listen to them once I've finished editing them.
Mm-hmm.
But just because I don't have time. But I listen and watch and read content, from people who have a shared meaning, but a different context and a different experience that I can learn from, and then try and apply it to something that I'm trying to do. And that's the conversation that we've just had, and those are the conversations that I'm trying to curate and create here. It's not sort of like greater than thou. It's not like, oh, look at this guy's at the end of the road now, and look at what he's achieved, and let's sit at the hallowed sort of halls and look up at the sage on the stage. It's like, let's get down, let's get around. It's more like a campfire conversation, right? Like, let's get really close and connected again. And let's share this experience and understand what we can all contribute to this. And even having had, a couple of conversations and then all of that, kind of like preamble, prologue, we still went into areas that we hadn't touched on.
Well, that's true, isn't it?
Yeah. So no, that's really, really cool. And I tell you, just a complete aside and like offline, off air. Hang on, I'm just going to stop all the recording so